Joining us now is Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul. Attorney General, as we watch for more developments at this hearing, do you believe the administration is disregarding court orders?
I think that's highly likely. I'm not party to that case. We as a state is not party to the case. However, in our case, the government's declarations were met with a lot of questioning from the judge and from our counter pleadings that unveiled credibility problems with what the government represents is happening on the ground in Chicago and the surrounding area. And there's been a lack of credibility. That's why I think we've been successful thus far getting a temporary restraining order.
So we've seen in this court filing many local people there in Chicago upset by the presence of immigration officials in their communities. What are you hearing from people on the ground there?
Well, they're not just upset about the presence of immigration enforcement officials, but it's also the tactics that immigration enforcement officials are using, not only towards undocumented, but towards U.S. citizens and towards journalists. And even in some cases, we've seen Chicago police officers wiping tear gas or pepper spray out of their eyes while they're just trying to keep the peace. And so if Border Patrol and ICE officials are going to act that way towards police officers and towards journalists and towards U.S. citizens, we're certainly going to see behavior towards undocumented immigrants that crosses the line of what's the proper use of force and the proper methodologies to employ immigration enforcement.
And of course, there's been ongoing back and forth over the president's threat to send in National Guard troops to the streets of Chicago. He's on an overseas trip in Asia, and he actually spoke about the use of National Guard in these incidents during this overseas trip. Let's listen.
We can't have cities that are troubled. And we're sending in our National Guard. And if we need more than the National Guard, we'll send more than the National Guard, because we're going to have safe cities. We're not going to have people killed in our cities. And whether people like that or not, that's what we're doing.
He says if we need more than the National Guard, we'll send more than the National Guard. What is your response to the president threatening to send in more than Guard troops into cities?
Well, it's first of all, it's inconsistent with what they're saying in court. They're saying in court that they need the National Guard simply to protect federal facilities as well as federal officers engaged in immigration enforcement. We've seen countless examples of the president talking about sending in the military to deal with crime, which is in the domain of local law enforcement. We have the 10th Amendment for a reason, to protect the sovereignty of states. And within that sovereignty is the ability to keep the peace with local and state law enforcement, which we've been doing within the city of Chicago for certain. And we've put forth that evidence, and that evidence included an email from a high-ranking ICE official saying that the local law enforcement was doing a great job keeping the peace at the ICE facility.
So far, you have successfully been able to prevent the administration from bringing in the National Guard, and a federal judge has blocked the National Guard indefinitely from deploying to the Chicago area. As we await a Supreme Court decision about all this, we've seen several cities now attempt to block troops from being deployed into their communities, with several lawsuits playing out. So we're covering it all. But some important context here. Of the president's 23 emergency requests for the Supreme Court to weigh in on a host of different issues, they have sided with him fully or partially 21 times. How do you anticipate the High Court to rule on this?
You know, I can't guess what the High Court's going to do. I can tell you the record that we provided, and the government hasn't provided any factual basis to support the notion of the president militarizing our city or any cities within our state. I can tell you the founding fathers didn't envision a president sending the militia of one state into another. And I can tell you that Congress has not laid out provisions that would allow for the president to do this. And so the Supreme Court has an opportunity to reaffirm what the founding fathers, what our Constitution says, and what our congressional law, our federal laws state. and I'm hopeful that they will do so. Interesting to add is that the federal government is not asking for an opportunity to present additional facts. They just want to argue that the president is just entitled to deference, no matter what the facts are.
Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, thank you very much for taking the time. We appreciate it.